Ladies and gentlemen, first, I'd like to say a big thank you and a warm welcome to all of you for participating in the Festival of Minds 2025 and being here today. I'm Jerry Cuthbert, and I graduated from here 50 years ago. It's actually marvelous to see how the school has grown and progressed over that time, but also to see how many aspects, both physical and intellectual, have continued to be true to the original vision. Charles Handy was our course director, and back in the 1970s, his introductory lecture to us, back in 1973, gave rise to the nickname that we still call our class by. And that's stuck for 50 years. We're all in touch with each other, and we're now spread out all over the world. But I'm pleased to say that the good 50% of us are here today. One of Charles's inspirations to us, one of many, including my wife and I, was his work on portfolio careers. And here's my wife's copy of his book that she read on the beach in Greece many years ago, and it's still got her post-it stickers in the pages. So it's a great honor for me today to introduce to you Herminia Ibarra, our Charles Handy Professor of Organizational Behavior. Herminia started her distinguished professional career at the Harvard Business School, and then after a long tenure there, moved to INSEAD, and thence joining us in 2002. Amongst her many accolades, publications and achievements, she's a member of the World Economic Forum's Expert Network and a judge for the Financial Times Business Book of the Year Awards. Herminia is also a Fellow of the British Academy and a Governor of the London Business School. I'm sure we've all observed and most probably experienced the transition from jobs to life to portfolio careers, one way or another. And it's of great interest that we are here today to hear Professor Herminia Ibarra lead us to build on that experience and take us along the evolution to reinventing work for our longer lives. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our Charles Handy Professor, Herminia Ibarra.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for being here on such a sunny, gorgeous day. It's a real pleasure. I'm going to talk about my favorite topic, which is how we reinvent ourselves. And those of you who have heard me before, you'll know how I always get started. I want you to raise your hand if you are now in some form of career transition, whether starting to think about it, in the throes of it, coming out the other side. Raise your hand. Okay, now keep your hands up, and add your hand if you're close to somebody, your partner, your kid, somebody who also is in the middle of this. Okay, so we got almost the full room. That means that you'll have a lot to say. I am myself, well, the funny thing with me is that I'm an academic, so I don't have to change careers. But my next question was going to be, how many of you have changed careers already once? Okay, often we come here for that, right? How many of you have changed careers twice? Okay, that's 50% easily. 3 times. How many have changed careers 3 times? Wow, I'd say that's like a quarter. 5 times? 5 times? Wow. And 6? No. Okay, 5 times. All right. So that's the world in which we live. And I'm going to talk about that. And I will tell you that, okay, let's see if this works. I'm going to talk about the trends that make it such that we are reinventing ourselves more and more so. And then I'm going to talk about why it's still hard even though we do it so often, and it often has such great results, but it's still hard. And then I'm going to talk about some reinvention strategies, kind of boiled down to the essence. And the basis for all of this is I've written a book about mid-career change, but since then I've started working on a new book project looking at the changes we make a little later in our lives and careers when we're a little more mature. And I've also started doing some courses for the LBS alumni. I know I've got some students of mine. It's an online course, so I've gotten to meet a couple of them just now, doing a course on career change at mid-career and beyond, and that has been a real source of insight. So I'll be talking about all of that. All right, so a quick view of the trends. Nothing here is going to surprise you, but we're making more and more career changes for at least four different reasons. One is we're living longer. Many of you know the wonderful research of Linda Gratton and Andrew Scott on the 100-year life. We're living longer, we're living healthy longer, and we are also needing to finance these longer, healthy lives, and we want to do things with them. So that's one of the drivers of more career change. We want to do more with these longer lives. A second one is technology. So my colleague Nikos is going to be talking to you about the whole generative AI revolution. It's going to disrupt a lot of things. It has already created a lot of opportunities. How many of you work remotely from wonderful locations? Okay. So we've gotten a lot about that. It's also disrupting a lot of occupations, a lot of organizations. We don't know, but it's creating some of the impetus for change. In my courses on career change, a lot of our alums are working to figure out how to harness AI for their entrepreneurial pursuits. So both threat and opportunity there. And then, of course, our organizations have been being disrupted for some time now. There's a lot of change, and there will continue to be more so as they figure out how to make use of technology, as they figure out what business they're actually in now when data is the main thing. There's also been a shift to contract work in a very significant way. We've seen mass layoffs, and we'll continue to see them in the years to come, and we're working very differently. So that also is an impetus for career change. Sometimes the work that we did no longer really exists, and sometimes the situations we're in no longer suit our lifestyles in what they demand of us. The last of the changes has been a slow burn. It's been coming for the 30 years since I've been studying careers, but what we want out of our work has evolved and changed massively. In fact, we want everything. We want meaning, we want purpose, we want flexibility, we want to learn, we want novelty. And what all the surveys show is that there's oftentimes a real values mismatch between what we want and what our employers offer. And that can also be a real push for change. In recent years, we have also started to focus a lot more on well-being, become aware of stress and burnout, and really wanting to move away from those things. So anyway, that's the big picture of why we're changing so often. This came from precisely this course, the course in the waiting list of our career change at mid-career and beyond. We asked people, what are the things driving? These were mostly, but not exclusively, alumni. What were the things driving their desire to make a career change? And in this last survey, we saw more of the negative push factors. Toxic environment, I want meaningful work, politics, burnout, but also wanting that flexibility and use of skills. I don't think this is going to surprise anybody. Those are some of the most significant drivers that we see. Which leads us to, so making a career change inevitably means going through a transition. And a transition is something that's different from a change. A transition is a process in which you're moving away from something, but you haven't completely left it. Maybe you haven't disconnected psychologically just yet. And you're moving towards something, but you still don't know exactly what it is. And so you're kind of in between. And that being in between is both the excitement and the possibility of it, but also the difficulty and the anxiety of it. What everybody tells me, you can tell me otherwise, I can ask you, is that it's hard all around. And 3 things come up a lot, and I'm sure you can add to this list, but 3 things come up a lot about what's hard. One is what to. So a lot of people will tell me they know what they don't want anymore, but they don't know what they really want instead, and that can often keep them stuck. We'll come back to that. There's the issue of timing when you have the choice. When's a good time to do this? And being that voluntary step into the unknown can be pretty tough. And then navigating what's known as the messy middle, that being in between, not knowing where you're going. I'm going to touch on these briefly, and you can tell me. But if you have a pressing question, please do ask. Please do ask. I'll try to leave a little time afterwards, but if you have a pressing question, do so. So in terms of what to, as I said, many people don't know what they want to move into. The other case is, this is a case of Jeremy, one of the people in my study who was moving out of a career in law, and what he said always makes me smile. I have to work with people I respect and enjoy. Who doesn't? Nobody says, I want to work with people that are jerks, right? I want to do things where I have impact. It has to add value, and I want some more control over my time. Who doesn't want that? Now, that's great that you know those things, but how do you translate that into particular paths to investigate, particular roles to look at? So anyway, pinpointing what it is part of the challenge of this. And I'll just skip ahead. That's why so much exploration is necessary in these changes. The second thing is timing, right? When's the right time to make the change? And I'm going to piggyback and honor Charles Handy a little bit longer. But when we think about timing, one of the things he talked a lot about, I don't know if you saw his books, including one that was called The Second Curve. The theoretical answer in terms of timing is you quit while you're ahead. You quit while you're on the up. And Charles, I have the honor of being the Charles Handy Chair, talked a lot about how this works for us as people, as companies, as societies. The idea is usually this foundation is a little bit longer. You're putting in a lot of effort, maybe not that much payoff, but at some point you start to do well, to succeed. And the idea is you don't want to wait until you're on the decline. Anything that goes up must go down. But you really want to start exploring and putting in place possibilities while you're still on the up, because it takes a while to build the networks, to build the skills, it requires resources to kind of jump off to a next curve. So the idea is don't wait, don't wait. Is that hard to do or what? It's extremely challenging. It's extremely anxiety-provoking. There's many reasons for it. Just to get you thinking about it, I don't know if you know who this man is. It's Jurgen Klopp, who was the manager of Liverpool, who surprised the whole world last year by quitting while he was ahead. And I'm going to just show you less than a minute's worth of him talking about what he was up to.
I will leave the club at the end of the season. I can understand that it's a shock for a lot of people in this moment when you hear it the first time, but obviously I can explain it, or at least try to explain it. And I love absolutely everything about this club. I love everything about the city. I love everything about our supporters. I love the team. I love the staff. I love everything. That I still take this decision probably shows you that I'm convinced it's the one I have to take. It is that how can I say that I'm running out of energy. I have no problem now. Obviously, I think I know it already for longer, that I will have to announce that at one point. But I'm absolutely fine now. But I know that I cannot do the job again and again and again and again. And after all the years we had together, and after all the time we spent together, and after all the things we went through together, the respect grew for you, the love grew for you, and the least thing I owe you is the truth. And that's the truth. But what are the alternative scenarios? What are they? Yeah. Usually you get, as a manager, you get a sack. So then you have a bad spell before 5, 6, 7 weeks, and everybody is relieved when you part ways. The other thing is you get. I'm not sure what's the other one. You get ill, and you have to stop. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I have to do it like that. And I came here and I said it on the first day, as a normal guy. I am still a normal guy. I just don't live a normal life for too long now, and I don't want to wait until I'm too old for having a normal life.
Pretty profound, pretty profound. In the study that I'm doing now, because I'm looking at people in the later stages of their careers, there's a lot of questions about when. You know, on the one hand, I'm in my peak earning years. On the other hand, how long am I going to wait? And do I still have the energy to work at what I'm doing right now? Do I want to do something else? Anyway, of course, this is not one we're going to resolve here, but that issue of timing is a very big one to think about and to talk about. A book that I would very much recommend is, I don't know if you've seen it, Annie Duke, Quit, The Power of Knowing When to Walk Away. The funny thing about Annie Duke is she was a PhD neuroscientist, behavioral scientist, but for a number of reasons had to stop that, and she came from a family of professional poker players. So that's what she did. She changed careers and became a poker player, and she's written a book that talks about why it's so hard for us to quit voluntarily. And there is a whole number of behavioral biases, including sunk costs, but also the strongest one is identity. The strongest one is identity. I am what I do. And even when I don't want that anymore, walking away from that is walking away not just from an investment, but it's walking away from an identity. She also says, very smart, when you quit on time, it actually feels like you're leaving stuff on the table. It's actually when you quit way past the due date that it becomes very clear why it is important. You know, for quite a number of people in my study, they waited until they actually got pushed out and then reported things like, I'm now sleeping through the night, what a relief it was, but how hard it is to take that decision. The last thing I want to talk about, and the things that are hard, is this kind of messy middle thing between an ending and a new beginning. And as I said, that ending could be psychological, it could be physical. You've lost your job, you've quit, you've stopped, and you haven't yet started something new. And in between is this time when you feel a loss of identity, first of all, because what we do, it's not just the title, it's the structure of your days, it's how you spend your time, it's your network, it's where you get feedback, where you feel a sense of mastery. All of those things feel pulled back away from you. How many of you have had that experience of feeling that identity void? Yeah, and it's really tough. I still remember very much this person who told me my identity was so entangled with my former employer. It was like clothes that wouldn't come off. They were so stuck to my skin, I didn't even know what I looked like without them. This is a person who had restructured herself out of a job, very high-flying financial director, and she thought she'd find the next job in a flash, but she didn't. She wanted to get to the CEO level, and she couldn't get that, and then COVID hit. And she said, nobody told me, actually, you're gonna go through hell. As doors closed, the process got more uncertain. It was a long, dark night of the soul. Nothing prepared me for it. It required one skill I didn't have, the skill of waiting. The weight of the wait was crushing. Incredibly emotional time for people. Really interesting studies showing how this time in between is both fraught, anxious, difficult, but at the same time full of possibilities, because you are now distanced away from the old rules, from the old expectations. Bit of an emotional roller coaster, but a time in which you can really discover yourself. One of the studies that it's the only one I want to share with you, was a study of founder exits. Okay, how many of you are in an entrepreneurial kind of role, founding businesses? Okay, so an exit, it's a huge moment of success, but it's also a moment of separation from your baby. And what these researchers found was that there were two patterns in the founders, what the process or the transition process that the founders went through. One process, you have the physical exit here, but the founder, knowing when the sale of the business is going to go through, starts playing around with new ideas, starts investigating other startups, starts investigating other investments. And by the time the physical exit happens, his or her identity is already with the new. There's been a separation, there's been a disconnection. This transition, as reported by these founders, not so traumatic, not so traumatic. The other pattern is you have your original venture, you have the sale of the venture, and in this period before the sale, before the physical exit, what the founder is doing is consolidating, leaving a legacy, getting the team in good shape, preparing the organization for life after him or her. No time for exploring what next. Very much focus on the firm itself. The firm is sold. Time of sadness and anguish. Also vacation, but a lot of time dealing with the sadness, the loss of identity, and also who am I and what makes me tick and what do I want to do next? So a real search for a next idea. Two very different processes. These people reported a lot more angst and a lot more personal learning because they took the time to figure out what it was that they wanted to do next. Does that resonate? It's tough. It's tough to find yourself. I've even seen people who have orchestrated a real sabbatical, or who've even quit with savings and a financial plan in order to explore the next thing, and this gets too much for them, and they jump to the first thing a headhunter proposes to them, because this process can be so challenging. And I'll talk a little bit more about what helps us go through that in a way that is productive and in a way that leads to a real creative kind of reinvention. Okay, so those are the hard things. Before I talk about what helps, does anybody want to add something to that? Did I miss something, or is there something that you would like to put on the table? Okay, all right. So let's talk about what helps. 5 things, and certainly we can add to these as well. I'm going to go through them in sequence. Sometimes taking a pause is the best place to start. Sometimes taking a pause is the best place to start, because in stepping back, you better prepare yourself to move forward. Moving fast is always going to anchor you in the things you already know, in the familiar, in the things that maybe you don't want to keep doing, that you don't have the energy for again and again. Slowing down allows you to reflect, to explore, to do different things. I'll show you a quote from somebody in the current study. This is a person who is a partner in one of the top audit firms. They have, where he is, there's a mandatory retirement age at age 60. He's 56, and he's thinking ahead about what kind of stage I want to build next. And he said, he actually took a sabbatical that his firm provided. He said he was the only person that ever availed himself of this sabbatical, because people don't want to lose their clients. They don't want to signal that they're on the way out. He took it. He said, I wanted to catch my breath. I haven't had a break in 10 years. Part of it was to work on my health, exercise, lose some weight, and to very actively plan for my next chapter. I did a lot of walking and giving myself time to think. My original thought was, what's the bucket list? And then he said, no, I want to do less, spend a bit longer in specific places, chill out. Rather than being in continuous motion, let's stop being busy and see what comes. There's a lot of evidence that this slowing down really allows us to come to different ideas about what it is that we want next. In fact, There's a lot of research in neuroscience that talks about what happens when we are at rest. That is, not in motion, not doing things actively, because we could rest reading a book, but simply resting. What happens is there's something called the default system that is responsible for all of these things: consolidating memories, integrating learnings, constructing a sense of self. All of that is happening when we take a rest. That's why when we're busy, we don't have the bandwidth to be creative about possibilities. So that's the first thing. Know when you have to take a pause as a way to get started. Second one is embrace your multiplicity. We are all lots of different people. We have many facets, we have many interests, we have many activities, we have many identities. All of our lives, we're always being told, where do you want to be 5 years from now? Who do you want to be in 3 years? This is a process that really benefits from us saying to ourselves, what is the range of possible futures that I might find really appealing and attractive? What are they? Let me start listing them. Let me start talking about them. Let me start flirting with them so that I can better inform myself, and again, not just jump into the next thing or not get stuck in something that is not necessarily going to be feasible or pan out or meet whatever requirements I have. So the idea is, and this is an idea that comes out of cognitive psychology, the idea is that who we are is not just our formative events, our past. It's not just who we are today, wife, mother, professor, but it's also our ideas about who we might, oh, there's a bit of dust, who we might become in the future. And those ideas about who we might become in the future, there's lots of them. They include dreams. They include oughts, things that other people think we ought to do, or we even put on ourselves. If I'm a responsible adult, I'm not going to go kind of flirt with that risky venture. I'm going to do this kind of more reasonable thing. They include feared selves. Feared selves in my older study was always somebody who was 10 years older and who didn't take the leap and who wasn't bold enough. And so the idea is, this is what could happen to me if I don't take action now. They include nascent possibilities that you can't really even explain or know if they're feasible, things that are improbable, but they're all parts of us. And even if they're not going to be your next career, so maybe you're not going to be a wine entrepreneur after all, but they are things that really can inform the search and help you move out of the path that you've been on. I'll give you one example. Sophie was she was chief compliance officer of a large consumer products firm. And she was originally a lawyer by training, but had been in compliance for a very long time. And she had been coming to the end of her rope for quite some time. And then in a conflict with her boss, decided this is the moment to take a package and explore. And she was always interested in a more creative side of things, in documentary filmmaking around a lot of the topics that she was seeing in her role in compliance around values, integrity, sustainability. And she wanted to try her hand on that, so she took a course in that. But at the same time, she explored other roles in other firms at the same level. She explored a portfolio career that included non-executive director roles. She explored, it was always a mix of the more creative and the more business focused, but she did some consulting on governance issues. She started almost like an education organization for compliance professionals. And she started looking at making films for profit because she learned very quickly that her dream child, the documentary filmmaker, was not going to be very lucrative, even if she attained heights of success. And so she explored all of these things. She learned some things. She very quickly decided actually the board stuff was not that satisfying for her. She wanted to do more active and creative things. She eventually discovered that she really did need to do a mix. So there was, do I want to do a portfolio or one big thing? She really did need to do a mix in order to make a living, but really exploring a whole range of possible things. So go crazy, let your imagination roam. When I teach about career change, By far, the most successful exercise is the most simple. I tell people, make a list of possible selves. Don't restrict yourself to things that are plausible or feasible. Doesn't matter. It's just for you. Make a list, share it with some people. And it's always eye-opening. And it's not just you making the list, it's seeing other people and seeing how other people respond to how you talk about those possibilities. Because your nonverbals will give you away immediately in terms of what you're really interested in and what you're not so interested in after all. So I highly encourage you to flirt with your possible selves. The way you do that is by projects. Dabble, be a dilettante, give yourself permission to try things. The only way we learn is by doing things. We don't learn in our heads. You can get some ideas in your heads, but you have to try things out. And it's important to try these things out without making a serious commitment, because many times, over and over again, I can tell you countless stories. The thing that we dream about, I wish I could do that, when you actually get a chance to do that, you don't like it so much after all. It's not what you thought it was going to be. When I was launching the second edition of my book about mid-career change, I was interviewed by a Wall Street Journal reporter who said to me, oh yeah, absolutely. I was dying to be able to stop working here in order to write books full time. I took a sabbatical to write one that I had a contract, and I could not wait to get back to my work in journalism. I didn't like it. It was too lonely. It was too unstructured. So try things out. There's lots, I know it's small print, lots of things. Projects, advisory work, moonlighting, investing, boards, associations, community involvement, taking or giving a class, organizing events, creating all of these things. The more actively you do something, the more you learn, the more skills you pick up, the more people you meet who are in those waters who can help you develop your thought process. It's a fast prototyping, just like in business. You have to fast prototype that new future that you want to start incubating. So lots of different things. One of the people in the first of my career change at mid-career and beyond said he had a method now that whenever he had an idea, he'd buy a book. And that was the cheapest, the minimum viable prototype. That's the cheapest in terms of time and money. He says, if I'm still interested, I'm going to look for a course that has a small group cohort aspect so that then I have the community to go for it. But step by step, low commitment, and as your interest increases, you hike it up. This is another example. So this is Jeremy, the one who wanted to work with people he liked and respected and who wanted control over his schedule. The interesting thing with him is he mucked around for a couple of years, and then he ended up taking another full-on kind of 24/7 big role because he got bored with the portfolio life. It was not, in fact, he thought he was going to do a good bit of coaching. He did a one-year training course. That's how I met him. And in the end, very clearly decided, great skill set. This is not for me. I don't have the temperament for it. But he played around with consulting, with chairing a few different things, nonprofit, community, business related. He toyed with going into a private equity partnership, lots of different things. But in the end, what he really wanted was a hands-on role with a team, with a P&L, and that's what he moved on into. So you never know. A lot of the times we assume that the way to search is the way we've been taught, what I call the plan and implement. You know the destination, figure out the steps. You know the CV, you know what to do. A lot of times when we don't know what we want, or when we're at a place or time in our life when we need to explore, the method is you have to do in order to know. It's an experiment and learn, process-driven kind of approach. It's harder. It's harder. This seems more obvious. It's more linear, but you can just keep banging your head up against the wall because you're either not getting that role or it's not what you want. Sometimes the only way you know what you want is to experiment a bit. Okay. Point number 4, your networks. How many of you remember your class on networks in Core OB course? What's the main message? What's the main message? This is a test. Do you remember what's the main message about the strength of weak ties? Do you remember that? Okay. So you can't rely on the usual suspects here. You know, as human beings, I'm always fond of saying the science shows we're narcissistic and lazy. We like people who are just like us, and they're right there. And it's very well documented in empirical research, but those are not the people that are going to help you find your way to a new career. They're not going to give you the leads. They're not going to give you the inspiration. They're going to give you just more of the same. And so if there's ever an area in which you really need to pay attention to your networks is when it comes to changing careers, okay? And we don't. The person who talked about the weight of the weight, she was very candid. She said, like most of us, I'm good at sustaining relationships with people with whom I've had strong connections. Duh, if you have a strong connection, they're your friends, you know, of course. But that's not what this is about. She says, what I didn't do is network with chairs of companies, influential people in my sector, 2 or 3 links removed in competitor organizations, unapologetically explaining I might like to work for them. I relied too much on headhunters. Big mistake when you're trying to make a career change. Why? The headhunter works for the client, not for you, and they're there to place you in exactly the same thing you have already been doing. So if you want a career change, not the thing to do. I should have been more expansive. Someone said to me, where have you been? I should have started meeting people adjacent to my sector earlier, but I was working full on. I missed most of the meetings of the network of financial directors I joined. Now, that's most of us. When I teach in executive education, that's where everybody is. Why? You're busy. You're full on. You've got lots of stakeholders. You've got to network with anyhow to do your job. And you lose track completely of the networks that are going to be relevant to your next career. And again, both in terms of leads, but also in terms of inspiration, finding people who are doing things that might be what you'd like to move into. Now, this is the quiz question from your Core OB course. 50 years back, I don't know how many years back, what's the percentage of people who find their next role through informal contacts? Is it less than 30%? Come on, let's participate. Is it 1, 2, 3? When this was done, it was here. Then it kind of went to here. Then it went to LinkedIn. So there's some ambiguity there, but it's a huge percentage. It's a huge percentage. And what was interesting about this research is not that we get our next job through informal contacts, but what informal contacts? Were they friends and close colleagues or more distant acquaintances? More distant acquaintances, people who either you don't see very often or you don't know very well, the weak ties. Now, why is that? Why is that? It's not because your strong ties know all of your fatal flaws. That's not the reason. Why is it that the weak ties lead you to your next job? There's more of them. So for sure it's a number game. There's more of them. They're further away. They're in other social circles, in other organizations, in other places. They're seeing things that you haven't seen because in 2 seconds you exhaust all the information that's there in friends and family. It's not that they don't want to help. They just know the same things you know already, and so do your coworkers. So if you want to think differently, you have to go several steps removed to people who are they're distant because we're narcissistic and lazy, so they're going to be different from you or in a different context. Now, this very famous study that was first done in the 1970s about getting a job, called The Strength of Weak Ties, recently got replicated by people studying LinkedIn. This was just a couple of years ago, and the study was published in Nature. And what was interesting about it, first of all, it's large. It was a study done on 20 million users. And 600K new jobs eventually accepted. What was interesting about it is they manipulated all of us unknowingly. You know, on LinkedIn, when you have the people you may know thing? Well, some of us got, in the people you may know, people that you had lots of contacts in common with, so stronger ties. And some of us got people you may know who you had few, if any, contacts in common with. And what they were able to show is that the people, so this was a real experiment, the people who got the people you may know who were weaker links were more likely to get the jobs. Were more likely to get a job. Beyond more than 10 contacts in common, the usefulness of the contact for finding a job declines. Why? Because it's the same information, no new information circulating. So what this says is, and this is an anecdotal version, this was Jeremy, he said, almost anything that has been worthwhile has come through some kind of existing connection, but often somebody I worked with 15 years ago, somebody I ran into at a conference 10 years ago, and I haven't, in his case, it was somebody who he had lunch with once a year, and no more than that. But those latent connections, latent social capital, the possibilities that are there, but you have to work at to get at them, that's what gets you. That's what gets you the next role in connection. Now, the bad news of it is it's harder to work these. You've got to list them, you've got to think, you've got to reach out. It's a lot of coffees. You don't know which are the ones that are going to pay off. Okay, this is the last of mine. I call this self-reflect out loud. So people get mad at me because the process that I propose doesn't sound like a very self-reflective process. And of course, it is important to reflect. But because in everything that I do, I put people in small groups to talk to each other about what they're doing and their possibilities, what people discover immediately in 2 seconds is once you have to formulate it well enough to explain it to somebody else, you get more clarity. And not only do you get more clarity, you also see where you're really confused. And not only that, the other person can then say, oh, I know somebody in that area, or here's somebody that you ought to meet. And it moves you into action immediately, whereas reflection does not. And this is a very action-driven process because it's experiment and learn. You don't know necessarily. You might pinpoint a destination, but you have to iterate through it. So the last of these is don't stay in your head, in particular when people are feeling either confused, I'm not sure what I want, or embarrassed, I've been laid off, I don't know where I'm going. They hesitate, they stay in their heads. And what really helps you get moving are these conversations that help you prioritize and sort out options. It's just a quote. When I talk to people about that, all kinds of opportunities spring up. For people, it's such an aha. You start talking about it. And I love what this man said. It's like you set off on a journey and then let passengers get on board as you go. Or maybe you get on board other people's journeys at the same time and you realize there's a whole train of people moving in that direction. Talk it out. Talk it out and find contexts in which you will be having these conversations, like an alumni reunion, like so many of the conferences here that we have at LBS, like my career change course, but so many of these things, a lot of what they will do for you beyond the content is putting you in front of kindred spirits who are also searching for a more fulfilling next chapter, and that helps a lot. So, I'm going to conclude. If you are in the throes of all of this, just start. Start anywhere. It doesn't mean you're making a commitment to do that. Just start. You will learn a lot. It's really about acting your way into that next chapter. And if you're not in the throes of it, just remember all of this because who knows when the next transition is going to come around for you. So I'm going to stop here and we can do some Q&A.